podcast. They got domains. They even took our mama's domains.
Fuck.
Now let's
Which
go
one
in
is this a
there
reference to?
and take this podcast, which is rightfully ours.
I was pretty sure it's Baby Driver.
Oh, this is the line that what's his face says.
When you
Jamie Foxx's character.
Yeah, that's so when we go in there, we're each going to bring our own geeky, nerdy perspectives. All right, now let's go over each of your code names. All right.
This is the Common Geeking Program. That's the name of this podcast that we're rightfully taking back. I feel like that's important to say.
No, that's minutia.
All right, you nerd with the giant headphones.
Well, I mean, does low-rent Jamie Foxx want to introduce who he is if he's leading the podcast?
I would just like to point out that no one else knows that Colin's wearing giant headphones.
All right, I will be running this shindig right here. I am Chowder. You don't need to know my actual name.
Yes.
All right, you, one with the giant ass headphones.
Oh, please tell me this doesn't last the entire episode.
No, it's not going to last the entire episode.
You're going I don't even think it's going to last the rest of the sentence he's saying now. My name is Colin Ketchen. I am currently doing my laundry, and I'll be talking about the fantastic 2007 film Hot Fuzz.
Giant beard, you're going to be
it's not bad,
Jeff.
Giant.
It's bigger than my beard.
Is that my only margin? Giant is larger than Colin's beard?
I'm saying that if he's talking to two of us, each of us has a beard. One of us has a larger beard. If he says giant
that doesn't
beard...
make it giant.
Look,
if he says giant beard...
Guys,
I know who he's talking to. Well, he doesn't have to describe me in any way. There's only two of us, and you already went. I can figure it out, Colin.
You should be able to figure out how big your goddamn beard is.
My name is Jeff.
Wait,
my
Jeff.
name is Jeff.
Hold on, let me just rewind.
Gotta go get my laundry. Be right back.
Let me just rewind this song real quick.
You motherfucker.
Go.
My name is Jeff, and this week I'm going to be talking about Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah, so this episode's going to be about Edgar Wright, with Baby Driver as a sort of central point for everybody, I guess.
You know there's someone out there who's going to be real pissed that we're not doing just like the 3 Simon Pegg, Nick Frost ones, that we're doing Hot Fuzz, Shaun of the Dead,
the Cornetto
and
trilogy.
Baby Driver. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is going to be a franchise special episodes of sorts where...
Yeah. With the term franchise being a little bit loose in this situation.
Yeah, in this case, we're not talking so much about a franchise as a particular director, Edgar Wright.
Directorial focus.
Yes, George Lucas, definitely.
I said directorial focus.
Oh, I thought you said George Lucas.
Yeah, we're doing
I was
George Lucas franchise.
I was very confused when I thought you said George Lucas.
No, these things did not happen. You'll hear the recording and hear how much of a fool you are. Oh, you missed the whole episode. We're done. I won. You didn't contribute at all to the discussion.
I ran up all those stairs 4 times for nothing. Well, shit. Thanks. Next week I'll be hosting Common Briefing Program. I'll have clean pants. That's cool.
All right, boys. So here's the plan. First, we talk about Baby Driver. Summarize that up. Summarize Edgar Wright up, right? Bing, bang, boom, done. Now each of you talk about what you brought to the table, and then we bring it all together in the discussion. And that's when we make our getaway in the ratings, where we rate Baby Driver out of 5.
This podcast is a metaphor for failure.
Aren't we all?
To the summary. Alright, so let's just talk about Baby Driver first, then we can move on to the videos I had you guys watch.
Baby Driver is just a full feature-length adaptation of that scene in Talladega Nights where 6-year-old Will Ferrell is driving the car like a maniac.
6-year-old Will Ferrell, played by Han Solo quote.
They use a lot of the forced perspective techniques from Lord of the Rings.
They should fucking do that to make toddlers look large. That'd be great.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's probably what they did with like Peter Dinklage in Avengers, right?
Well, I mean, it was green screen. It was not forced. They didn't shoot Chris Hemsworth
obviously
2 miles behind Peter Dinklage. I don't think the focal length would capture both of them.
I guess he was a lot.
Okay.
Okay.
So what we have here is a story of a boy with an angelic mother who died and a shitty dad who has to deal with a sort of criminal father figure, all set to the tunes of old nostalgic songs. But enough about Guardians of the Galaxy. Let's talk about Baby Driver.
You piece of shit. You duped me. So let's talk about actually Baby Driver.
All right, so Baby Driver is Edgar Wright's latest film. It is a sort of neo-noir kind of story about this character named Baby, who is like a getaway driver, who doesn't really want to work in crime, but he has some debts to pay off to...
He got caught in the system.
Yeah, exactly. He owes money to Kevin Spacey, who is keeping him around against his will, which, knowing what Kevin Spacey has done now, takes on a whole new meaning.
I have watched the movie both before and after the revelations about his character had surfaced. Watching it after is a lot more cringeworthy than watching it before. Yeah. Especially when he says things like, "That's my baby," and then Jamie Foxx says, "Fuck your baby," and I'm like, "No, Kevin, don't, Kevin, please don't."
Yeah. Just for the record, I apologize for the fucking helicopter sounds happening outside my window right now. Whatever, if that shows up on the recording.
Just use a laser pointer and point it at the helicopter so they fly away, and you'll have like 30 minutes to record before the SWAT team kicks in your door.
Perfect.
30 minutes of silence.
And then chaos.
So, Baby Driver.
Yeah, so, one of the more unique aspects of Baby Driver is that how it uses
sound design,
how it's songs. Everything's like edited to the beat and rhythm of the music, and like the main character is an audiophiles who like is constantly listening to musics.
And he's got fucking tinnitus. It's great.
You use the word "great" pretty liberally.
What?
It's great for the movie, not for him. For him, I suspect it's pretty bad.
Yeah, it is a movie that very much simultaneously exemplifies Edgar Wright's style, but also takes it to new places, which is why I felt it was worth using as sort of the focal point for this episode about Edgar Wright. So I also had you guys watch 3 YouTube videos, 3 video essays. So the first essay I had you guys watch was a video called, I'm trying to look at the exact title here, so, like, how Edgar Wright does visual comedy.
Pretty relevant for our domains.
It's a video by Every Frame a Painting. It talks about how a lot of, like, comedies don't really make use of, like, visual humor and editing to like get humor from the audience, mostly just dialogue.
Yeah, and it spends a lot of time talking about how other movies will frequently just like use the camera as a window to see everything else portraying the comedy, but in no way does the use of the camera, does the use of sound editing actually emphasize the jokes being told, which when compared to Baby Driver is sorry?
Which it definitely does in Edgar Wright's movie.
Oh yeah, it's so important. And with Baby Driver in particular, it's not really a comedy, it's an action movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more dramatic than comedic.
Yeah. And the same techniques that he uses in comedies actually translate pretty well to action movies.
Yeah.
Like his constant sense of motion, his unwillingness to like rest on a subject for no reason. There's always something moving. I would call his filmmaking style like ruthlessly efficient. Like everything he does is in service of something bigger. And I mean, I'm going to talk about that with Hot Fuzz, but yeah, Baby Driver.
In the Every Frame a Painting video, he goes over some of the techniques such as like getting comedy out of how things enter the frame and exit the frame.
Yeah.
Cutting to music and cutting to the beat.
Question, Chowder. Were those videos posted before the release of Baby Driver?
At least, I'm pretty sure, this one in particular was.
Yeah. The first two were released before Baby Driver.
And the third one's about Baby Driver.
Because
Baby Driver.
I don't know the extent of Edgar Wright's like filmography, but he mostly did comedies before Baby Driver, right? Like Baby Driver is this first like big not a comedy movie.
Yeah, like we had the Cornetto trilogy, which are just straight up comedies. Then we had Scott Pilgrim, which is like somewhere in between, and then Baby Driver, which is.
I mean, I would say it's still, like, it does other things, but it is primarily a comedy, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in Baby Driver, I mean, I think if we're talking about how he uses cinematography and camera work to emphasize beats of the movie, I think his sound, Chowder, as you mentioned, like editing to the beats of songs, that's one tool. That's probably the most obvious tool and one that's really easy to latch onto. Like, wow, this all syncs up. That's so cool and thoughtful.
Yeah,
and windshield wipers moving to the beat of a song, but it goes so much deeper than just
Like when Baby's in that chase scene where Baby's running away from the cops. Like his breathing is actually timed to the music as well.
Yep.
Or like how they use his tinnitus as a thing as well. Like whenever Baby's more stressed out or panicking. His tinnitus like acts up, and you can hear the ringing in his ear, and that is very true to how tinnitus works. Like people who are more stressed out, like the ringing becomes more louder to them.
Yeah.
And
the other interesting thing about like the music use is that it's all pretty much diegetic. Is that like most of the music is what Baby is listening to, and that's like really shown like whenever someone like removes a headphone from his ear or whatever, it gets quieter or only comes through like the speaker that is still there, right?
Yeah.
Or if they like take it off altogether, you can still hear it, but it's a lot lighter, and then like that ringing starts to come in because he uses the music to drown out his tinnitus. So like a lot of it is, you know.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is the music is also used to like play with time, right? Because Baby Driver has a lot of sort of discontinuous editing where things will happen way quicker than they would. Like
when he orders coffee in like the opening scene, and then they give it to him like 5 seconds later, but he's still at that point in the song.
Or like just any of the robberies, because would a robbery really happen within the span of a 4-minute song? You know.
And I mean, the audio editing stuff goes beyond that to the point where even in scenes where there is no music or no score, there is still a sense of internal rhythm. Like there's a scene where Kevin and Baby are talking in front of the elevator, and Kevin says, "You're gonna go right to the top," and he points his finger up at the ceiling, and right when he does, there's a ding from the elevator, and it's just thematically a lot of little things coming together, and the movie is just riddled with those little bits of attention to detail from the transitions to everything else.
No, the whole thing is very rhythmic, even just like in the way that the characters talk to each other. It's like poetic in a sort of way.
As I was attempting to do earlier in the episode.
I mean, in post it might sound better.
I hope in post it sounds amazing, so Jeff and I sound like total dickholes.
We might either way.
Well, speaking of transitions, that brings us to the second movie, second video, YouTube video, made by a nerd writer, Scott Pilgrim, Making Your Transitions Count. It's about, like, Edgar Wright's use of screen transitions, and how that...
When you said speaking of transitions, I thought you meant transitioning to another part of the podcast, not talking about transitions.
Yeah, I thought you were employing a clever segue. I mean, I guess he was segueing from,
he was transitioning
part B
to
of the summary to part C, yeah.
He breaks down, like, Scott Pilgrim's use of transitions, how like, even though they're so fast, there's like a very careful frame by frame control of it that is there, that helps like work with Scott Pilgrim's themes of transition, also like helps pull the viewer closer into the world that they're in, and
well, because Scott Pilgrim's based on a comic, so you have a lot of transitions that use like comic book lettering flying across the screen, and like little letterboxes saying like "Meanwhile in this place."
Yeah. But but it gets really creative too. Like the example Nerdwriter used was like when Anna Kendrick and Scott Pilgrim are.
I forgot she was in that movie.
Yeah, I always forget she's in that movie.
Like Scott Pilgrim's sister and him are on the phone, right? They're doing like the split screen thing where she's on the left and he's on the right, right? And when they transition to the next scene, what they do is like she looks to the right. Scott Pilgrim like starts framing and moving to the left, and while that is happening, it uses the couch as a way to like mask a transition into where they use the text to then dolly wipe into a downward angle to Scott Pilgrim talking to Nod Chow, and it's such a fluid motion, and
it's for anybody listening who is not intimately familiar with filming techniques, these are basically just things that typically you'll use one at a time to add motion to a shot, and Edgar Wright crams all these basic techniques into each other in ways that are really, really fluid, and you see it in Baby Driver a lot too, instances where like a car is driving by and like the wheel wipes into a new shot, like you don't just see what's behind the car, you see the next shot, and you don't even know a transition has happened until after you're in the next scene. It feels so natural. He has such a control over that sort of thing.
Yeah, like Baby Driver especially likes making a lot of use of like match cuts, like using the rim of a car to like match cut to a laundromat where like all the clothes are tumbling in the dryer,
In the same way a wheel would spin. That little scene in the laundromat where Baby and I think it's Deborah are dancing, I think that's maybe my favorite scene in the movie, just because they're sharing a pair of wired headphones, and the way that they just have, like, they do try to dance with each other, but it seems so perfectly choreographed between the things in the back, the way the wires never get tangled, which if you've ever pulled headphones out of your pocket, is a dirty lie. They'd still be at the hospital right now getting disconnected. I
mean, that's like a lot of the things with like why his movies seem so fluid, right? Is that he pulls out a lot of the realistic complications, like the example we were talking about earlier with him ordering the coffee and then it taking like 5 seconds for him to get the coffee. Like, Edgar Wright recognizes those things don't matter, and even if you notice that that's unrealistic, it's just like, okay, but the rhythm is more important, and it fits with that, right? And it almost plays with it in a sort of way.
Yeah, it's kind of like...
Whereas you set it up as like, oh, I'm supposed to be watching a situation which is not necessarily unrealistic, but there are elements of it that are purposefully taken out for the sake of the rhythm.
It makes me think of a song where they, where the lyricist will use improper grammar for the sake of sticking to the beat. It's very much that
right,
idea.
Yeah. Or even like, but I mean, I guess I don't like the way that we're making it sound where it's like, oh, they're doing it for the sake of like sticking to the beat or doing, it's like, that actually is a creative choice in and of itself,
like, the remarkable thing is, like, not only do they, like, very loyally stick to the beat of the music, there is a purpose to that. Like, like everything's got a meaning to it that serves the story on top of serving the technical needs. Yeah,
because whenever the beat of the song doesn't feel fluid, it reflects a dissonant, scared tone in the movie. Like Edgar, what is it? Like the song skipping or not starting at the right time, like, screws up an entire action sequence. You can feel how stressed he is, because we're like, no, that's not right. That's not what you've been doing this whole time. And toward the end, when you've got the fight between Baby and John Hamm's character, the lyrics of the, like, saying he always sees red, and then, like, the red lights from the dashboard of the police car, like, all these things that jut out, by setting such a clear tone for the movie, when you break that tone, it draws your attention to it, and it's just a level of detail that you don't see in a lot of other movies.
Yeah,
right, exactly. And it's like a subconscious bringing your attention to something too.
It's not clangy; it's intuitive.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is why, like, when you do visual things, I think you more or less get the cues when they're being given to you, and you're like, okay, I see what I'm supposed to be looking at here. Whereas with auditory clues, it kind of like, it does something without you being able to consciously recognize that it's making you feel a certain way.
Yeah.
So, Chowder, I don't want to step on you too much. We probably should move on to the next. I don't know if you want to talk a little more about the third video in the discussion.
Yeah,
because I also know it's not directly related to what we're talking about right now.
Yeah, I'll make the third one quick. Okay. Yeah, no, like, you two brought up, like, the use of color when, during the final, or during one of the last scenes with Buddy, and, yeah, that...
Fucking master of transitions, Chowder.
Yeah, so now we're transitioning out of transitions into color, which is what the third video was about. God. Made by Films Radar. It's about how Baby Driver color codes its character, color codes its set design, and like just wanted to draw attention to like often overlooked aspect of Edgar Wright's style, which is how he color codes things to like A, help the action stick out better, B, represent what state the characters are in, create foreshadowing, create mood, all sorts of stuff like that. And, yeah, those would be the 3 videos I had you guys watch. Jeff.
Might be.
And, yeah, so let's move on to the domains.
Chowder, I'm formally requesting an introduction into my domain.
Okay.
Is this like a 3 to 5 business day sort of situation? How long am I waiting for this?
Give me a second here. All right. All right, Colin. You go in, you do your domain, out, and then Bob's your uncle. All right.
Fuck. All right. Fuck. All right. So hi. On the topic of Edgar Wright, I'm going to be representing Star Trek Into Darkness, the 5-minute point where J.J. Abrams let Edgar Wright make a couple shots in the volcano sequence with Spock. Just kidding. I'm talking about Ant-Man. No, that's too mean. Just kidding. I'm talking about Hot Fuzz.
Oh, I forgot.
All right. Stop. Let me just rewind the song real quick.
You already made that joke, you piece of shit.
I might cut one or the other out, all right?
Anyways. Are you the editor, Chowder? You could put it in post, and I'll pretend, ah ha 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 ha. There's a very natural laugh for you.
Your jokes are
to
funny.
Edit in wherever you make a good joke. Enjoy that natural laugh. Okay, so I'm talking about Hot Fuzz, because Hot Fuzz is like, I always say it's in like my top 3 favorite movies, but I don't know what the other 2 in my top 3 are, so I think Hot Fuzz might be my favorite movie. I'm going to commit to that. Hot Fuzz is my favorite movie. So, Hot Fuzz is the second film in what is referred to as the Cornetto Trilogy. The Cornetto Trilogy is comprised of Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and The World's End. So, this trilogy is basically a set of 3 movies featuring similar actors, the 2 same lead actors, and central themes that bind the movies together. Themes like one versus the collective, and a lot of themes of personal growth in social settings and things like that. But Hot Fuzz is the one that I like the most. Made in 2007, Hot Fuzz follows Sergeant Nicholas Angel, a member of the Metropolitan Police Service in London, who is then transferred against his will to Sandford, Gloucestershire, out in the country. Because he's such a good cop in London, he's making all the other cops look bad. And the plot of the film centers around, it's very fish out of water, but in an unusual way, where you've got, like, you know, Northern England, like Country Blumpkin sort of attitudes, in the way that I guess maybe Country Blumpkin doesn't transfer to Great Britain, I'm not sure. But but he's like super serious about everything. It's like, you can't loiter there, you can't drink, you can't do all this stuff, and everybody's getting really pissed at him because he's just kind of rubbing up against their way of doing things. The ultimate twist being there's a series of murders and everybody's like, this is out the country, nothing bad ever happens here, the last murder was 30 years ago. Like, they're all like, it's all accidents. And he's like, you ever notice why the accident rate is so high but the murder rate is so low? There's a conspiracy where the people in charge of the town, including his new police chief, are killing anyone that they think makes the town not perfect so that they can win like the Village of the Year award in honor of the police chief's dead wife who went insane when a bunch of jugglers came to town and spray painted everything. That's the plot. Right. That's the plot. And the reason I love this movie is not the plot, which it is pretty tight and everything connects. Character motivation is solid throughout. But when I use the term ruthlessly efficient, I think this is the film where that comes up, because I think it is more of an action film than any other film he's done besides Baby Driver, and definitely more than his show Spaced. The things that I really like about Hot Fuzz, coming back to the ideas of transitions, one big thing that video Chowder mentions, it actually talks a lot about Hot Fuzz, because the ability Edgar Wright has to make the movement from one scene to another meaningful is pretty impressive. So the transition from the scene where Angel finds out he's being transferred is him taking a series of trains. He's got his peace lily under his arm, and it's him making his way to Sandford, Gloucestershire. And it's maybe like a 10-second sequence, but it's a bunch of really fast, like rapid cuts of just like him on the train, falling asleep on the train. The train wakes him up, checking his phone. He's got 4 bars. Next train, now he has no bars on his cell phone. And it's just like a lot of little things that if you blink and you miss it, like you're not missing out on the story, but it does a really good job of communicating his frustration, his downtroddenness, and just sort of illustrating what it's like to move from one place to another and how it all blurs together. And the movie continues with things like that, where I think Hot Fuzz excels, where I think maybe Shaun of the Dead and World's End don't do as well, is the snappy dialogue, which Baby Driver was, I think, written primarily by Edgar Wright, where Hot Fuzz was co-written by Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg. Where Hot Fuzz really succeeds is, again, with that rhythmic attitude. By repeating certain lines over and over again, or using the same words over and over again, you have a sense of recall to earlier sentences throughout the film. Like early on in the film, Nicholas Angel walks into a candy shop, and it's like, check out his arse! And then later in the film, he rides in on a horse with 2 shotguns on his backpack and sunglasses and a toothpick in his mouth. And the same lady's like, check out his horse! And there's like a lot of little things like that seem like jokes, and they are jokes because they land because you remember them, but that sense of recall allows the film to bounce back and forth between things but never feel out of place.
There's a lot of stuff like that in Shaun of the Dead too.
Oh yeah, for sure. I find Shaun of the Dead excellent, but a little less refined than Hot Fuzz. I know generally Shaun of the Dead is the favorite.
It is the first one.
It is. It's the first one, and that's, I think, why Hot Fuzz is improved for it. But the sense of style that Edgar Wright carries into films like Scott Pilgrim and Baby Driver, which feel very unique, I honestly have a hard time describing Hot Fuzz to anyone other than Edgar Wright. Like that's the tone of the film.
You can only describe the movie to Edgar Wright.
Yeah, I can't tell anyone else what Hot Fuzz is, but which is why I'm hoping Edgar Wright is listening to this episode. It's the
Edgar Wright.
Yeah. So the reason I chose Hot Fuzz is it is my favorite movie, but it also, I think, shows the clearest refinement of his skills at handling minutia, at handling, like Jeff said, those little things that in real life don't matter, but in a film, if you can clean them up, they go so much more smoothly. That and the fact that I think the jokes in this film are legitimately hilarious. And the dialogue is never super complicated, but by giving you accessible words, repeating things at different points throughout the movie, there's such a strong connective tissue. I think the biggest count against this, ironically, is the pace in the transition from the second to third acts of the movie. Not because the momentum lets down, but just because as a movie, it's like a whodunit, like who's killing all these people? And I think in the plot, something gets a little lost in the middle where you can feel it sort of drag. Not because of any of the filmmaking stuff, but I think just because of the script. So those are my thoughts on Hot Fuzz. Reasonable summary, maybe not as much detail as I would like to go into, but that's why we have a discussion coming up so that I can talk about 7 Across and 12 Down.
All right, Colin's done his job. Now it's time for you to hit the gas pedal and vroom, vroom. Let's go, Jeff.
Alrighty.
Jeff, would you mind repeating that vroom sound you just made? There you go.
Jeff is here talking about Shaun of the Dead, as previously mentioned, the first in the Cornetto trilogy. So it stars Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. The basic plot of the movie is, well, it's about zombies. Let's get that one fucking right out there and out the open. So there's this guy named Shaun who he's having some issues with his girlfriend because he's kind of in a perpetual rut where he's just content living his life in a sort of lazy manner and always like kind of looking after his neckbeard of a roommate, played by Nick Frost, Ed, I think his name is. And she's getting frustrated with them never having any alone time, and him just kind of being content just going to the same bar, the Winchester, over and over again, and not doing anything with his life, really. So there's a lot of, before the zombies happen, there's a lot of comparisons to not only Simon Pegg's character, but like pretty much everyone in the world to like kind of drones and zombies. And then so much to the point where the zombie apocalypse starts happening and they don't notice for quite a while. Like there's lots of little hints. I think the movie plays off the fact that you already know that it's about zombies pretty heavily, especially in the first act, where there's a lot of things where you see people sort of acting like zombies, like groaning, having dead expressions on their face, and you're supposed to be, as the viewer, wondering, like, oh shit, are they a zombie because I know zombies are coming, or is that just how they are? And they play with that a lot.
That and the returning gag of "you got red on you," where like the guy spills red ink on his shirt and then later it's blood.
He puts a red pen in his pocket and in somewhere before the zombie apocalypse, and then people keep commenting on all the blood on him later when he's like beating up zombies, like, oh, you've got some red on you. The basic plot of the movie is they're trying, once the zombie apocalypse happens, Simon Pegg and Nick Frost characters decide that they're going to go round up, Shaun's mother and Shaun's now ex-girlfriend, because she broke up with him the day before because of all the, problems and shit. And they're going to gather up all those people and go to the Winchester, the bar, because their theory is that, there's big, heavy locking doors, and there's a Winchester gun above the mantle that Ed swears is a real gun, and they're having this argument back and forth the entire time about whether or not it actually functions, or if it's just like a set piece because that's what the bar is named. So it's kind of about their adventure to get to the bar, and there's like, the relationship problem going on the entire time. Shaun's got problems with his mother's husband, his stepdad, and also the flatmates of his girlfriend. Well, really just the one, who's kind of like pushing the divide between them. I was like, I'm not at 5 minutes yet. What is that alarm for?
Chowder, tag out.
Anyway, so that's the basic plot of the movie. I think that where this movie really excels, like the things that really stand out to me about Edgar Wright's style are the like sound design, the framing, and the like timing. And the latter two, I think, are really big parts of the comedy in Shaun of the Dead. They play with framing a lot. Like, just for example, like in the first scene, right? It's Shaun and what's the girlfriend's name? Liz? No. That's not right. Do you remember the girlfriend's name?
I don't remember.
Anyway, Shaun and his girlfriend are having an argument about how they never get any alone time, and you think it's just them, and then she comments on the fact that, like, they're never there without Ed, and then this camera turns over, and she's like, no offense, Ed, and he's like, oh, none taken. And then they continue this argument, and you're like, okay, it's them and Ed, right? And she's like, this is why I like, feel like I have to bring my flatmates everywhere, because, like, then it would just be me, you, and Ed, right? And then Shaun says something like, oh, and don't get me wrong, I like your flatmates. You guys know I like... And it pans the other way, and they're sitting there. And there's a fucking brilliant shot that is used a couple times where he's in the bathroom, and the mirror on the cabinet is slightly ajar, and he's looking at himself in the mirror, and then he closes the mirror, which pans the shot in the mirror over to show that his other roommate is standing behind him. So that happens before his roommate gets turned into a zombie, where he's just like complaining about Nick Frost's character. And then that happens after the roommate is a zombie, where you see his silhouette in the shot. It's just fucking brilliant. Anyway, I'm at time. I'll talk about it a bit more later, but it's a very funny movie, and the timing and the framing is really integral to the comedy, as per Edgar Wright's style.
Okay. Alright, so things have gone to shit, but we can salvage this heist if we play our cards right. Time
we won't.
for the discussion.
Spoiler alert. We will not play our cards right.
We are notoriously bad at podcasts and card games. Also, my cat, I'm really nervous he's going to like bump my microphone cable and like ruin my recording. It won't ruin it, it'll just stop it. But I don't want to have to go through that clap hell again.
I'd be more worried about Dom doing that than your cat, to be totally honest.
Dominic doesn't roll around on my living room floor, and I can't make him do backflips with just my arms.
Well, I'll concede to that second point, but I would always imagine Dominic just occasionally going into the living room and rolling around.
I do it more than he does. I'm a cat dad to the highest degree.
Literal and figurative.
It is. Dude, oh man, sorry, I gotta vent for a second. A friend of mine, oh no, get your tail out from the cord! This is what I'm worried about! So, my friend needed someone to cat sit her kitten.
Hold on.
I cat sat.
Can this be a confession corner?
If you would like it to be.
Let's do it.
So, forgive me, Padre, for I have goofed because I should have known better. Because I accepted the responsibility of cat sitting 2 3-month-old kittens for my friend, and I fell in love with them. And then she took them back, and now I hate her. And this is a crime of vanity and ignorance because I know I can't walk out of a PetSmart without crying. Why did I think I could do it for 5 days? I couldn't. Especially because one of the cats looks like a tiny version of Odo, and they were sitting next to each other, and I'll send you guys a picture. You don't think you're going to care, but you'll care when you see it. And then it got to the point where he's 3 times bigger than them, and he was tackling them, and I really thought they were going to die. That's maybe not a good thing, but, you know, it's part of my experience. Anyway, I'm sad. I hate my friend, and I want those cats back. I might steal them, and I'll have another confession corner.
Story of my life.
All right. Forgive me, Padre, for I did done goofed.
Oh, fuck all right? You too.
Yes.
Jeff never has anything to confess. Chowder, what have you done, my podcast?
So, recently I saw a tweet talking about Africa by Toto, and basically...
Wait, the song Africa by Toto, or a tweet about Africa also by Toto?
The song.
Okay,
the
cool.
song.
Had to be clear.
And, like, you know, the tweet was basically just a joke. Joke about how, like, millennials chose to like the most annoying song ever in order to annoy older generations. And so
there's
he's talking
plenty
about
more annoying songs.
And, you know, he's talking about, like, how nobody will buy us, ironically, liking Africa. And I'm like, wait, we were supposed to be ironically enjoying that song? Oh, fuck. I've been unironically
You've been
enjoying
doing
the
it
song.
all wrong.
Chowder, now you have to start disliking that song.
But I like that song.
It's alright. I don't have strong feelings one way or the other about Africa, I would say. The song.
Well, Chowder, do you too bless the rains down in Africa?
Fuck yeah, I do.
Well, I think we should take the time to do the things we never had. My favorite sentence in any song. No, I hate it. It's awful.
Okay. I was like, that's a really basic-ass line to be your favorite.
No, it's to do the things we never had. To do this is not that thing where you tweak the things to fit the rhythm. They were just like, let's take a verb and let's take a descriptor that don't match. That's it. That's the whole joke.
That's sort of how I feel about the entirety of the song How to Save a Life. It's just the lyrics are they're real fucking rough to get through.
I mean, the lyrics are rough to understand because of the voice that sings them. That is my opinion.
Yeah, but once you understand them, then you're like, oh shit, this is so bad. It's just it's so poorly written.
It sounded so meaningful when you heard the whining, but once you see past the whining, they suck. I've actually heard Frey songs I like, but I don't like the song.
What is the song about? I've actually never got past the whining.
Yeah, it's about like, oh, if I had noticed the signs and stopped someone from committing suicide. That's not why the song is bad. It's the lyrics that are bad. Like, they just fucking rhyme the same word with the same word. But, like, you know, songs repeat lines sometimes, and that's all well and good. But it's rhythmically done as if it's supposed to be a different line that rhymes, but it's just the same line said a second time. And I'm just like, what? You think I wouldn't fucking notice that? Or, like, words that are, like, nowhere even moderately close to rhyming, which is, like, you know, songs can do that too. But it's done in a way that makes it sound like it ought to, you know. All
right, Chowder, I've gotten us in the weeds. Yeah, I've gotten us in the weeds, Chowder. Can you make a smooth transition back to Edgar Wright?
Oh, goddamn, challenge accepted.
Well, you know, speaking of music and...
oh, that was weak.
I'm 2 out of 3 ain't bad, all right?
That's how I feel about the people on this episode. Ouch. We'll discuss later.
Are you the one?
I mean, like I said earlier, I agree. So, Baby Driver.
Baby Driver, yeah.
So Edgar Wright.
Well, Chowder, you had some talking points, some main themes central to the episode. We could just kick off with some of those.
Yeah, maybe we want to get into the discussion first. Say that we're in the discussion. That's maybe a thing we want to do.
Oh yeah, Jeff's right. We should. We should say we're in the discussion.
We just start off talking about fucking how to save a life, and then we're like, oh yeah, we should probably talk, right? Yeah, that's how this discussion.
We are in discussion now, where we discuss.
Really? Is
it? We spent so much time talking about how Edgar Wright takes the time to edit out all the simple awkward minutia to make it more rhythmically nice, and here we are in this episode just being like, yeah, 2 minutes later, oh yeah, we should probably talk, right?
Yeah. I also just we're in the discussion where we discuss, don't they teach you really early on not to use the word in its definition? What else?
Wait, what do you mean?
This is the discussion where we discuss.
I mean, you're defining definitions, so I don't know, man.
I mean, fuck. So it's just from a communication standpoint, using the same word over and over again is distracting and.
So what you're communicating to me is that the word communicating would be a bad way to communicate. Gotcha.
I know you're trolling me, but I know where you live. I think we're just let's just nix everything that's happened so far. That's my vote.
The whole episode. Hi, this is the Common Geeking Program.
This is going to be the longest post-credits ever.
Episode 87 is canceled. I'm sorry.
So, let's just start with the simpler one. What kind of techniques does Edgar Wright use in his films?
He points the camera at people, and then he pushes record.
Fuck off. All right, that was Colin's answer. I'm going to jump in here and say, like I mentioned briefly in my domain, I'd say that the biggest things about Edgar Wright's style that stand out to me are the timing, right? How he, the timing of the dialogue, like we were talking about with Baby Driver, all the rhythmic stuff with the music and all of that. The sound design, I think Baby Driver is the biggest example of that, where it does all the stuff with the music and tinnitus, and the framing of the shots, where he does a lot. What's right outside of the shot is in many times just as important as what's in the shot. Because then when he, moves to it, you have to be like, wait, shit, should I have been able to see that before? Like, the first scene in Shaun of the Dead where they reveal that the flatmates are sitting there the whole time, I'm just like, oh, they did a thing where they weren't actually there. But then, and then I went back and watched it. I was like, oh, shit, they just never showed that side of the room until it was relevant,
Yeah, so a recurring joke in Edgar Wright's films, or things that are off camera, moving into camera in a very jarring way,
Scott Pilgrim is a huge example of that.
Where a phone will ring and it's it's for you, and you just see a hand come into
exactly.
Yeah.
Or the thing that I always think about with Scott Pilgrim is the scene where Knives knocks on the door, and then it shows simultaneously Scott jumping out the window and Wallace closing the door slightly a little bit to conceal it at the same exact time, and it's just that's timing, framing, it's it works perfectly, and then it syncs up with what's happening exactly in the dialogue, which is why it makes it feel sort of an unreal sort of setting where things are working more efficiently and timely than they would in real life, and it's something that's there's a varying degree to how much it's noticeable, right? Because I think something that's interesting about Shaun of the Dead is where these other movies make everything very efficient, Shaun of the Dead also makes things efficiently clumsy. It does a lot of things to emphasize the fact that the characters aren't fucking capable of what they're doing, but it still fits in that same style of it's still sort of rhythmically happening the way that it wouldn't it's still efficient, but in a clumsy way. I don't know.
Yeah, until it gets to the scene where Queen starts playing and they're all beating the zombie
to
the beat of the Queen song with
so fucking good. And then, the entire scene, they're yelling will someone fucking turn that off? I'm like, don't turn it off!
Yeah.
This is amazing.
So that was Jeff's answer. So I'm gonna jump in here. So I think Hot Fuzz does a couple things differently because of its own internal style. Mm-hmm. I think it's the first time that I really sensed Edgar Wright had a mastery of clean transitions and quick transitions. And in the specific like camera techniques that are used to keep the momentum going through these transitions are two big things, are like quick pans and wipes where the camera very quickly jolts from one side to the other. And it'll frequently be accompanied by like a whooshing sound to like emphasize the motion that's going on. Just like whoosh, and you're suddenly looking at a different part of the room or a different part of the city, depending on how they want the transition to work. But something he uses a lot in Hot Fuzz that he doesn't do a ton, I think maybe the next up is Baby Driver in terms of how much he uses it, is the punch zoom, where like the field of view, like the angle of the camera is constant, but they very, very quickly zoom it in. And it's that move is sort of tropey at this point because back in the days of limited camera techniques, zooming in was one of the few ways that you could dynamically alter a shot. But now it's like, okay, it's a cheesy way to add emphasis to something. And it is used so much in Hot Fuzz. Particularly, my favorite is early on in the film, they're chasing a swan. And then in the end of the movie, the swan is in the cop car. And it punch zooms on the swan and it goes and then it bites the guy, and then it just cuts to a static wide shot of the car swerving through a field and running into a tree. And it's like a really fun juxtaposition of like crazy motion emphasis and then just like very static thing with ridiculous subject inside of it.
Oh, Ant-Man does that a lot too, where like
we'll talk about it. We'll talk about Ant-Man later, I think, because he didn't, direct that one.
He didn't direct that one, but you can see where his
influence is left. Yeah. So sticking with Hot Fuzz just for the moment, because I desperately want to talk a little bit about the tragedy of Ant-Man.
Hot Fuzz.
But so where? Oh shit! I lost it. Hold on a sec. What
Everyone's favorite Shakespearean play, The Tragedy of Ant-Man.
Yeah, and okay, I got it. And I think the tools that enable a lot of this stuff to take place come from just fundamental understandings of each component of what he's doing, but in particular the script, because Edgar Wright, as his namesake would suggest, writes the movies he directs. And I kind of don't think that if you took a generic comedy film script, again, going back to that first video you sent us, Chowder, about like how most comedies ignore comedic filmmaking, I think you'd have a hard time, like if you just threw the Step Brothers script at Edgar Wright and said, make this movie, if you didn't give him the freedom to alter that script, I'd be curious to see how well that movie turns out, and if it really does match the precision and the excellence of his other films, even the ones that are a little less refined. Just because I don't know that you can have this sense of momentum if the dialogue is not perfect. If a sentence drags on for like an extra sentence or has some clunky wording, then that can really clang against what you're experiencing in a way that his movies generally don't. So I think all these things are enabled by him having control over this to the core and having an excellent idea how to execute on his vision.
Well, yeah, I mean, going off of that too, I feel like his movies, like the plots and the script, generally take a bit of a back seat to this sort of like rhythmic stuff, and I think that's sort of by necessity.
Yeah, like he does.
Yeah,
like if you look at like the actual plots, then
like Baby Driver, the characters are all very stock heist movie characters, stock.
They're very much like caricatures. They get good motivations, but like the way that they're performed is very
exactly. So it's like it's sort of like they take these sort of basic things and then give it this sort of rhythmic spin to it. Give everyone, like the actors all like take on this this character that's like very specific without it having to be said out loud. And I think that it very like. So if you gave him a script from a different comedy movie, I don't think it would work in the same way, because it's like, well, actually most of the comedy in Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead has to do with like the timing and what yada yada. The actual things they're saying by themselves, not as funny as it is with the film
it's techniques. A culmination of like film technique, performance, set design, prop, like everything. It feels like everything is so vertically integrated in a way that, all film production is intended to be,
right?
But
like
it really works with him.
Like in Shaun of the Dead, there's this great joke, which is like, it's really fucking stupid, but it when it happens, it's so funny, is that like earlier in the movie, you know, like Nick Frost keeps like complaining about things, Ed does, and he keeps saying like, oh, cock it, right? And it's just like, okay, yeah, that's just something he's saying, right? And then later in the movie, they're struggling with the fucking Winchester, and they're trying to figure out what it doesn't shoot, and he just goes, oh, cock it! And then he cocks the gun, and he shoots it, and it's really funny.
That's making me think, though. So what are your thoughts on, like, Scott Pilgrim, which is, like, an adaptation that, so Edgar Wright wouldn't have, like, had, control over the writing of Scott Pilgrim because...
So, question here, though, is that, like, when they decided to make it a Scott Pilgrim movie, was that Edgar Wright being like, hey, this should be made a movie made out of? Or did someone else be like, hey, I want to make a movie out of this, Edgar Wright, can you direct it? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know,
find out.
Like, who took the initiative in that process? Because if it were Edgar Wright's decision, then it's probably something more along the lines of like, oh, hey, this is really funny and this fits with my kind of jam and style, so I should make a movie. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, in which case it fits totally well, which it does. You know, like the comedy in Scott Pilgrim is very Edgar Wright-y. You know, not saying it derived from that, but coincidentally is kind of similar thing, you know, just in paper instead of
Scott Pilgrim.
Are you looking it up?
He was I just looked it up. Edgar Wright was contracted by Universal to make the film, so he didn't pitch it to them. It was brought to his doorstep. But Chowder, to respond to your question, I think the point I was making was more specifically about the screenplay, because the screenplay is a component of the film. Right. Source material is not directly a component of the film, because he was a writer, director, and producer on this film, so he had control over, I would say, at least in every department. So when we're talking about screenplay...
Right, but a lot of the...
Scott Pilgrim is more of a testament of how well he adapts it, and then does that adaptation maintain his excellence. Not so much was he handed something that fits his tone, because he was able to choose the tone of the movie.
Yeah, that's true, but I mean, like, even the dialogue is pretty, I think, like, similar to his kind of style of dialogue in his movies that he writes, you know? It's just
you mean the dialogue in the comic?
Yeah, the dialogue in the comic.
Yeah, okay.
Like, a lot of the stuff, like, there was not, like, you know, there are changes comic to movie, but like having read parts of the comic, right, like a lot of the lines from the movie make it in there, and I feel like maybe it's biased because I saw the movie first, but like I feel like the comic it portrays the tone that was in the comic. You know what I mean? It's not like it's not like he altered it to fit his style. Like I think that it was something that like
that inherently
was probably handed to him because it fits in his style. You know what I mean?
So the this actually, Chowder, because you mentioned it before, and I don't know if we have cut it from the episode yet, but I kind of yet.
Well, we haven't cut it yet because we haven't started editing.
Well, at this point, I'm trying to address the listener. Dear listener, we will have cut some stuff by now. You're welcome. This episode is a disaster. So if we look at your question, like if he's handed like a script, how does or a set of material? If Edgar Wright is handed a set of material, how does that translate into his finished film product? We mentioned it briefly a little while ago. Ant-Man. I want to talk. I think, Chowder, you also want to talk about this a little bit. I think this is a weird instance where, for anyone who doesn't know, Edgar Wright was working on Ant-Man as far back as 2006. The Marvel Cinematic Universe started in 2008, so in the early teens, he was working on... And Paul Rudd was attached since 2006, so this movie had been in development for almost 10 years at the time of its release, but when it came time to like actually integrate it to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the director left over creative differences. And Edgar Wright has gone on record saying, like, I love the Marvel movies, but I won't watch Ant-Man. It's kind of like hanging out with an old girlfriend. Like, it's just, you don't, like, there's a discomfort there that he doesn't want to address. And that totally makes sense to me. But when watching the movie, talking about all these stylistic things and how the script can influence these stylistic things, I guess, Chowder, I'm interested to hear your response because you also brought it up. How do you feel the remnants of Edgar Wright's touches shown through in the final product of the 2015 film Ant-Man?
Well, I think it shows through in like a lot of how the humor is derived, like comparing it to say Ant-Man 2 or Ant-Man Lost.
Hold on, I don't want to I want to bring this back just a little bit because I feel like maybe I lost something there what happened with Edgar Wright and Ant-Man?
As they were producing
creative
the film,
differences.
Creative differences, basically meaning So Peyton Reed was the director of Ant-Man. Edgar Wright got fired or left. Creative differences.
I thought that they switched halfway through.
Yeah, they did.
No. They hadn't begun filming. He had shot some test footage. But before the film started shooting, Edgar Wright had left.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it's not like there are things in the movie he shot. There are things he wrote. They took his script and they changed it. And I assume that the reason he left was that they wanted to change so many things to make it fit into the MCU that he was like, this isn't the movie I wanted to make. And they probably said, nope, this is not going to work. So with that, the remnants of what he did are in the script and in the casting and in pre-production and some of the basic design. So like his fingerprints are all over. And I'm wondering, even though he didn't helm the film and even though he didn't have final say on the script, do you guys still feel his presence there? Like, how does that show through?
It shows through in like how the humor is derived. Like compared to say Ant-Man and Wasp. Ant-Man and Wasp has humor, but it's more in line with the other Marvel Cinematic Universe movies where it's characters making wisecracks and stuff like that. Whereas the first Ant-Man, humor is like very kinetic, you know, like you'll have like an epic shot of like Ant-Man and his army of ants fighting against Yellow Jacket and then like pull out to show that it's all really tiny.
Yeah, kind of like that goose shot with the car, where like you pull out for the crazy juxtaposition.
Yeah,
right.
Like I think a great example is like with the character of Luis. Compare Ant-Man to Ant-Man and Wasp. In the first movie, the humor is very much I heard from a guy who heard from a guy who heard from this guy who heard from this guy.
Yeah, and it's one of those like quick transition sequences.
Yeah.
That
and where he's narrating, but the clip is the person talking, but their voice, like they're lip syncing to his narration, not how they would say. Yeah, so it's like
that's a good point. I didn't even thought about that because that feels very Edgar Wright. That feels like a Hot Fuzz style, like quick fire scene,
right?
But all he did there was the script and maybe some of the previs,
right? Exactly. It's like it works better in the film than it would in real life, sort of. But sorry, continue on with what you're saying with that as compared to Ant-Man.
Yeah, whereas in Ant-Man and Wasp, the joke is he babbles on about pointless stuff, you know, and so it's just like him recapping,
which is both. I mean, I think that the joke was both of those things in the first movie too.
Yeah, I think in Ant-Man and the Wasp, it did learn from Edgar Wright a little bit. One of the choices that was made early on, and Peyton Reed took credit for this, but I don't know who actually did it, the aspect ratio, so how wide the image of the film is. In most movies are like 16 by 9, 16 by 10. And this one, no, they're normally 16 by 9, which is a very wide, like widescreen TV shape. 16 by 10 is a little bit taller, and because Ant-Man has a lot of size changing, they said we wanted something more vertical. So it feels a little less cinematic, but the compromise is you get more room to play vertically with a character who grows and shrinks. I do think that the second one
I never thought about that, but
the second one learned from that a little bit because they're and again talking about
full of shit. They don't fucking make it taller. They make it.
Yeah, well, unless you see it in IMAX, then it's kind of worth it. But if you're talking about, again, visual storytelling and like the ability to just have what is on screen tell the joke rather than the dialogue and the characters, there is a sequence in Ant-Man and the Wasp where Scott Lang gets stuck as a child-sized person, and he's wearing a hoodie running around an elementary school. And it didn't feel sharp in the way that Edgar Wright humor does. And there were things in the first Ant-Man script that were like, what are we going to do? We should call the Avengers. And that was a joke. Like, that is not a joke that Edgar Wright would write. It's so pandering and funny in the way that, like, I know what they're talking about. Oh, look, I'm so happy.
That joke, I love the inclusion of that joke. Not because I thought it was that funny, but because, like, I was so irritated by the fact that no one has ever fucking said that in any of these movies yet until that point.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it worked in the context of the MCU, but I can see how that doesn't necessarily fit with, like, you know, the line is so opaque and heavy, but not really clever. So I don't think that that's something I would expect to see in Hot Fuzz. It works in the context of the 10 movies, the 20 movies, but I don't think it works to his style. And that, I think, is like the biggest sign of, yes, his fingerprints remain, and God, I hope filmmakers keep taking from this style and from his sensibilities, but I think that's where that one sort of falls off the rails for me. Not because it was bad, but because
do we have any listener questions?
No,
we do. But I want to ask. I do want to ask one more question. Then we'll move on to a listener question. How do the techniques he uses in comedy carry over into other genres? Because Baby Driver is more dramatic than his other films, so...
Yeah, so, like, what I would say is, like, a lot of the elements that he uses in Shaun of the Dead are, like, these sort of, like, repetitions and motifs of lines that come back, right? Whereas, like, it serves in a sort of comedic sense in that film. I think the same things are done in Baby Driver, which just like push it to feeling toward like more rhythmic, and like the music is so integral to that movie that it's like that's like a big part of it, is that like when stuff is repeated over and over again, that gives it a sense of like rhythm, you know? So I think that in that specific case, I think that it works really well, because it's just like it's not about it's about like what's being repeated, I guess, right? Whereas in Shaun of the Dead, it's used in a comedic way, because like the things that are being repeated like serve towards a joke, or they're like actually funny things. Whereas in Baby Driver, when stuff is repeated, it's just like, oh, okay, this is something that I'm paying attention to now because I heard that before, you know? Like it doesn't, it's not funny. Yeah, it's recall, but it's not like, it's not funny in the same way because of just the way that it's being utilized, I guess. To answer that question, I actually want to ding against Hot Fuzz a little bit, which is, like I said, like the last big chunk of the movie is an all-out fucking firefight between Simon Pegg and Nick Frost characters and everybody in the town in on that conspiracy. And it is a buck-wild gunfight full of like turns and awkward beats and car chases and explosions. There's lots of turns and car chases in Baby Driver too.
Yeah.
This is true. Well, here's what I want to say, because I think... first of all, to compare the budgets, Edgar Wright's films have never been super high budget. Hot Fuzz was $12 million. Baby Driver was like $30 million, which, if you're talking blockbuster, is not a lot, really.
Which is probably why he's allowed to have so much control, because, you know...
Yeah, they're not throwing a ton of money at him.
Yeah, he keeps the cost low, yeah.
And he does so much with it, but where I think another complaint can be lobbied against Hot Fuzz is that gunfight can sort of get away from you trying to follow the action. It is so kinetic, but by virtue of how many people are involved in the gunfight, his quick cut style kind of loses track of it a little bit. I've seen the movie 18 times, so I know what's going on. I think that if you're first time watching, that could be a little overwhelming. Comparing it to Baby Driver, and this could just come with his growth and experience as a director and a filmmaker, the action scenes are so easy to follow, even though they can be ridiculously complex.
Because there's only like 10 characters to follow, you know?
That, and the fact that when he's in a car, like car chases on a busy highway could get confusing and muddled, but he has such a clean way of portraying that information. So I think if you're talking about just the finer points, the transitions, the snappy dialogue, I think he's proven he can sort of do that in a lot of different contexts. When it comes to his handling of the cinematography, and this also comes down to his, you know, directors of photography and stuff like that. When it comes to his handling of cinematography, I think he's only gotten better with time, because I've seen him do so well in Baby Driver, and because that movie can feel so different from the Cornetto and Scott Pilgrim, but still feel like it's his movie. I think he can do it. I think it translates well, and I want to see him do other genres.
So I think that the big thing that I would leave off on is that I feel like the main thing I would describe his style as is rhythmic, right? I've been saying it a lot. And I think whether or not he's using that for a comedic effect or a different movie, I think kind of depends on the rhythm that he chooses in a sort of way.
I agree with that.
Let's move on to listener questions. So this first question is from this fellow I've never heard of, Navy Year.
You're making that joke to just make up for the fact of the number of times that you've actually genuinely mispronounced your name.
Yep. All right, so
We fucking recorded an episode with her, and then in the the credits read, Chowder was like, and we were joined by Janavi. I was like, we talked to her for an hour and a half, and you don't know how to pronounce her name.
All right, what is the question?
I'm sorry, Janavi.
Yeah, what'd she ask?
Or the comment.
All right, so, does Wright go as far as to actually subvert film genres, or is he doing more of a fun genre fanfic kind of deal, where he just kind of...
I think an argument can be made that he's a subversive director in that he releases a movie in a genre like Hot Fuzz is a comedy, but it branches hard into action. And then Shaun of the Dead is a comedy and it branches into like body horror and stuff like that. I guess he's subversive in that way, but I think more than subversive, I think I would just say he's excellent. And by that I mean like technically excellent. Like his ability to be very precise gives him a mastery over certain things, or at least his film's a mastery over certain things that maybe we're just not used to considering, like, oh, this is just like the best in its class. Like, I remember reading a bunch of reviews for Gears of War. People are like, yeah, oh, it's like one of the best shooters in the genre. It doesn't like change a whole bunch, but it is like the highest benchmark for this kind of thing. I think it can go both ways, depending on the movie and depending on the perspective.
Yeah, I would say I would steer more towards he's subversive, I think, because he does do things that are like technically like rule breaking in terms of like the biggest thing about Edgar Wright, I'd say, is that he makes you very aware of the camera, right? Like of the camera's existence. And traditionally in filmmaking techniques, you're supposed to hide the existence of the camera as much as possible. So I'd say that I agree with you that he's really good at all these techniques, but it's sort of like you have to know the rules really well in order to break them. But I do think that he does break them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's fair. I would think Scott Pilgrim's probably the biggest example of that.
My thought is, with the exception of Baby Driver, I think his films are subversive because with the Cornetto trilogy, they have this running theme of like, you know, that staple in comedy that a lot of comedy like to use, but that's redundant. That where it's like, it's about like a stunted man-child who learns to grow up, right?
Right.
Like that is the plot of almost every Adam Sandler film.
Except does he?
And that's the thing. Like in the Cornetto trilogy, the joke is he doesn't grow up. Like,
in Shaun of the Dead, he's like fucking, spoiler alert, but fucking Ed becomes a zombie, and the entire movie is about him, like, you know, distancing himself from Ed. And then the last scene of the movie is he goes into the shed and he starts playing video games with zombie Ed.
Not until later.
Well, Hot Fuzz takes in a different direction where he's had a hard time adjusting to this new life, and at the end he's like, I kind of like it here, which is a callback to a line he said in the beginning of the movie. As that one is explicitly about him having grown. Is explicitly a story about his growth, because in the beginning he doesn't want to leave London. He's like, I kind of like it here, and then they ask like, hey, you did a great job out here in Sanford, Gloucestershire, can you come back to London? And he's like, no, I think I like it here. And it is explicitly about that growth. So not every movie is about it. I think World's End and Hot Fuzz and Scott Pilgrim do a very good job of talking about that growth.
Well, Scott Pilgrim, Scott Pilgrim is subversive for a different reason, because it takes apart, like, the nice guy trope, you know? Like, Scott Pilgrim is the nice guy, but turns out he's just really a douche.
Mm-hmm. Just like most nice guys.
And since you can't see, I'm gonna just tell you we're putting nice guy in air quotes. And, I mean, Scott Pilgrim is, by nature of being an adaptation, like, the comic book was subversive, so I guess the movie by extension would be subversive too.
Right, but are there things about the filming techniques in Scott Pilgrim that are subversive? I would say, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we should probably also define what we all mean by subversive here, because we're just starting to throw the word around a lot. Like, there are things that in traditional filmmaking that are considered to be like rights and wrongs, right? Like I mentioned earlier, like making the audience aware of the fact that the camera is a part of the thing is a traditional wrong, right? So he is subversive in the fact that part of his style is to point out the camera, right? And make you like very aware of what it's doing, right? Which is, it works to his style, but it is a
technical no-no.
So technique-wise, he is always subversive.
Yeah.
From a literary perspective, whether he is subversive or not can vary from movie to movie, because Baby Driver is very much played straight. It is very much that, neo-noir heist film kind of a story played straight. You know, Baby Driver is the getaway driver with a heart of gold. Bats is the crazy guy. Buddy's the guy who is friendly with the main character.
I think move on.
I think it I think it does play with that a little bit, because Buddy's trope, right, is that he's supposed to be the guy who's kind of like friendly to him, and then he ends up being the worst villain in the end. You know?
Yeah,
like,
but
the bigger
like that,
problem.
But like that, like that's a lot like what happens in Reservoir Dogs, where like the character who is friends become enemies. You know, that's a very heist movie kind of thing. You know,
that's fair. That's fair.
All right. Let's move on to the other question. All right, so the second question is from Sam Bowles. Now, for context, in our post we ask, which Edgar Wright movie is your favorite? What do you like about them? And Sam Bowles says, is all of the above a cop-out? Because all of the above is my answer. Or Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. There should be an episode on Scott Pilgrim.
I think you can turn, is it episode 6 or 7 of this podcast?
6.
Episode Highway in a Closet is the name of it. Go check it out.
Wait, or is 6 the Potter Papa Pills episode? Is that 5? Okay,
that was Edgar Allan Brickman. I love that episode.
Yeah.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, Sam Bowles, you are in luck. Scott Pilgrim was one of our earliest episodes, so check out Highway in a Closet. Don't worry, we'll wait.
Fuck you. Let that joke die.
So if you want, whoever, I forget who edited, I think Chowder, you edited an episode with that joke a little while ago, and it had like hold music on it, and I laughed really hard when I heard that.
Yeah, no, it's like, this is like the 4th instance of that joke. The first instance was in the episode, I think it was the Halloween episode, right? Where that joke originates.
Yeah.
So
where everyone was like, "This domain is great. Go watch it right now. Pause the podcast." Yeah.
So if you guys want to if you listeners want to make any contributions to our show, listener stuff is up usually every Monday on our Facebook. If you want to take a look at that, leave a comment. We always try to incorporate it into our discussion as smoothly and naturally as we did today. All right.
All right, let's move on to the ratings.
Okay, so here's the thing, right? This is something I've been wanting to point out for a fucking while, is that how I feel about the Transition 5, the one between discussion and ratings, is it feels like if the CGP was a video game, that would be the water level, is how it sounds to me. And I've been waiting a while to make that joke because I had to be on an episode where I was on an episode with 2 editors. And it just has not lined up in that way for a long time.
Wait, Transition 5?
Yeah. Fucking pause the podcast. Listen to it right now.
I guess so, because it's a transposition of what is currently Transition 2, used to be Transition 3, but the second version of Transition 3 was meant to sound sort of underwater. So I guess...
It's got a very ambient feel to it. I can see it being in like a water level.
Transition 5 has cymbals and crazy drums in it, and like boom, it's crazy.
No, it does it? Wait, hold on.
It's got a cymbal every time. It has a cymbal on every beat, like.
I know you wrote it. I have to fucking listen to this right now because I just straight up don't believe you.
All right, Chowder. Well, Jeff is gonna listen to the Jeff is going to listen to the music our listeners have already listened to. Where are we now? What are we doing?
Well, thank you both for a very watery discussion.
Oh, gross.
Okay, I hear the cymbals, but I don't know enough about music, but it's like it's about the instrumentals that you use, because it's like doo 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 doo, you know?
Oh yeah, well yeah, that's also the transition to I just think the drums in 5 make it feel very not equestrian, but that is just my opinion. Obviously,
the drums are very background though. Like,
I don't know. It's enough to break it for me. Anyway, yes, very watery discussion.
Now we move on to the ratings. Now we move on to the ratings. and we will have the representatives rate Baby Driver. Now, what I'm gonna have you rate it out of, it's gonna take a little setting up, but here goes. You got John Bernthal, right? He's looking at you very angrily right now. He's giving you the stink eye. And in your pocket,
he's going to be the villain of the movie, but then he's only in one scene.
Exactly. And in your pockets, you have 5 pairs of sunglasses. Now, how you're going to rate this is how many pairs of sunglasses is John Bernthal going to knock off your face? How many do you put on? How many does he knock off?
And now you can take that genuine laugh from Colin and edit it in place of the fake one that he provided you with early.
How do you know any of my laughs are genuine? I could be a sociopath. So if I'm gonna rate
are those
this
mutually
film,
exclusive?
What? No. I'm gonna rate this film. I feel like I've been whoring out the 5 reviews lately. I gave Tony Hawk a 5, but honestly, Baby Driver. So I have a medical condition, and this condition
is that you can only rate things 5 out of 5 stars.
5 out of 5. No, I have a medical condition that makes me photosensitive. And when I'm in a pretty bad spell, 1, I wear ridiculous sunglasses. 2, I get like really bad migraines. And I was in the throes of like when this first started, Baby Driver was in theaters. So June of 2017 is when I first started to notice this issue. And I was like out of work for a couple days, just sitting there like, I can't look at my TV, I can't look at my phone, like everything hurts. I'm gonna go see Baby Driver. And it hurt, and it was so fucking worth it. God, it was so worth it. I really enjoy the film. I will suffer through it in any context you can throw at me because I find its pace, its ingenuity, and again, just its technical excellence so compelling. I think I have to give it. I think I have to put 5 pairs. Well, I have to put 5 pairs of sunglasses on my face.
Man, John Bernthal's just like really slapping you, man.
That's, I think, every man's fantasy.
That's a good funny to see John Bernthal slap Colin.
I'm just imagining him talking like in Punisher, like, "Don't you ever do this to me again! What did you do to my family?" And I'm just like, it's too bright.
Yep.
Okay, so Baby Driver was my favorite movie of 2017, and my fucking heart broke when it did not win the sound design award.
That pissed me off so much.
And I have not seen Dunkirk. I've heard it's good, but that killed me so much because the sound design in Baby Driver was fucking everything, you know. And so it was a fantastic movie. I loved all the stylistic elements of it, all the characters, all of the acting, everything about it. I think that I would have given it a 4 out of 5 sunglasses being slapped off my face until the fucking scene at the end of the movie when she reveals that all along, spoiler alert, his name was Miles. And God fucking damn does that pun deserve a 5 out of 5 in my book.
They took a page out of the Sonic the Hedgehog handbook with that one. Jeff, the only reason I remember his name is actually Miles is because you went on such a tirade about it after the movie came out.
God. I thought I saw this movie with Chowder and Keenan. Isn't that, we saw it at Scotia, right?
Yeah.
I don't think I saw it with you guys, but like at a point we were hanging out, you said something about it.
I was like watching the movie, she said his name was Miles, and I was just like, fuck, that's so good.
This movie really goes the distance, you know?
Exactly.
God, fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you. Just fuck you.
Baby Driver is getting my ever elusive 5 out of 5 Punisher slapping fucking
Chowder,
sunglasses off my face.
How did we do this week?
Or, to bring it back to my own domain, Shaun from The Walking Dead slapping sunglasses off of my face.
Alright, so now I am going to give one of these 2 reps a gold star for contributing to the episode the best. Now, goddamn, Colin,
there's a lot of... Jesus Christ. There's a lot of good choices here, I think. Not for us, I mean for the gold star.
Yeah, no, it's hard, but I think I'm gonna have to go with the golden... the golden iPod.
That's fair.
Well, I'll take it.
You might or might not take it.
Very lukewarm reception to this week's gold star. Okay. Yep. Golf clap.
It's appropriate.
Yeah, it's appropriate. All right. So, the golden iPod goes to... Colin Ketchen.
Booyah! All right. Are you, okay, good. I thought you were just going to gloss right past that.
You get no reason.
Yeah. No, you had a lot to say. This was like right up your alley, and you were contributing a lot to the discussion. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I always get excited when it's a topic. I lucked out this cycle because the last episode I was on was Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2. Fucking, I know that game inside and out, and I'm a big Edgar Wright fan. I'm never gonna have a cycle this good again in terms of getting things I know a lot about.
Is this episode 87?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Who won Chowder? Who won 86?
We haven't recorded that yet. We're recording that tonight.
Right.
Oh, you got a fun day. I've had double days. All right.
I'm the one who has to edit it up.
All right. So that about wraps it up. Thank you for listening to the Common Geeking Program. I'm your host, Chowder, or Taeemul, whichever you prefer. I don't think I did the whichever you prefer thing earlier.
You didn't, because you said we don't have to know your real name, and now you told us our real name, so guess what? We're going to kill you and put you in the trunk of Kevin Spacey's car.
Yeah.
That's not a place you want to be.
No. Oh, no. Ah!
That was a pillow laugh out of me.
Yeah, you can find me at Taeemul, or you can find me on Twitter at Taeemul Chowdhury. I do art stuff, I draw, I also retweet art stuff, so...
You do art stuff, and you draw.
Distinctively
and you
different.
retweet art stuff.
Again, I've been joined by Colin Ketchen and Jeff Leavitt. So you guys link yourself, I guess.
You can find me on Twitter as well, at SonicColinK, and a variety of other platforms. I'm the only one on the internet with this, so if you Google it, it's me.
He's spent a lot of time searching for an imposter.
To no avail. It's something I'm looking for. I need to find an imposter to make my life easier.
I'm just going to go impersonate you before this episode comes out to make you a fucking liar.
Fuck.
I'll just go, I can't tell if you're just looking at me or if you're frozen.
I must be frozen because I'm no, I don't have a joke.
You're not.
Sorry.
You're not frozen anymore. And my name is Jeff, and you can find me on Instagram at Things I Wish Existed with a dot between each word. I know you want to make the joke again. You already made it
I know,
once.
but it's such a long joke to make. I can't make it every time. I got to pick my battles.
Also, just to rewind just a little bit, I'm always salty about not winning, but in retrospect, there's no fucking way Colin couldn't be the one who wins the golden iPod.
I would like to disclaim that as an employee of Apple, nothing I say here is representative of Apple's stances or positions as a company.
God, I fucking hope not. Otherwise, Apple has got has a lot of opinions on matters that are completely unrelated to computers.
Yes, Apple has a lot of opinions about Jeff specifically.
And Sonic the Hedgehog.
Okay, so next week will be a Common Briefing Program episode where Colin here will be talking about geek news.
We're talking about the news.
Just by himself.
We record these a lot closer to when they release, so I don't know what we're talking about just yet. I'm very excited, though. Briefing programs are a lot of fun. They're a little more laid back, and last time I was in a Common Briefing program, it turned into the Common Beefing program, and that was just one of the most delightful turns I've experienced in my life.
All right, so is there anything else I gotta...
read the outro, but no, nothing new. This episode is so... We gotta press that Y button to get back on the rails.
Be sure to tune in next Friday on whatever the fuck the date is, and follow us on Facebook or Twitter at Geeking Program. Any engagement such as sharing a post...
November.
Huh? What?
The 9th of November is when that one airs.
Yeah, so tune in the 9th of November, and follow us on Facebook or Twitter at Geeking Program. Any engagement such as sharing a post, tagging us, or tweeting #CGP will enter you into a raffle where you get to pick the topic for a future episode. Reviewing us on Apple Podcast is a critical help to growing our show, and we'll read any new reviews on the air. Anyways, thanks for listening, subscribing, sharing.
This episode of the Common Geeking Program is hosted by Chowder. Just Chowder. He said it this week, so I can too. He's joined by Colin, Ketchen, and Jeff Leavitt. This episode is sponsored by My Clean Pants. I'm recording this weeks after the episode, and they still smell fresh. The podcast is created and produced by Colin, Ketchen, and Jeff Leavitt, with this episode edited by me, Colin Ketchen, and Chowder, Just Chowder, featuring original music, also by me. Next week, I'll be hosting your episode about the Common Briefing Program, which I'm recording in about 20 minutes, so that's fun. So tune into that, as I'm about to tune into it, and we'll talk to you next week.
Really anything, and we'll talk to you next week. Ciao.
I mean, I will. These two won't, because I love you. I was talking to the listener.
Oh, I see, because you're in the next episode. I understand. I was like, what the fuck do you mean by that?